Well, hello, folks. This is Joe Dolivo, the CTO of 4 Solutions, coming at you live alongside my colleague here, Geralt the Giraffe, who's got a headset on as well. This is a new thing that we're starting up where we want to do approximately monthly vlogs around Q&A. So questions that we get from customers or other parts of the community about our products, about Industry 4.0, digital transformation, maybe SAP connectivity in some cases, but all areas that are kind of hot right now in the community. And we want to find this kind of interactive avenue to share with you some of our thoughts and feelings and hopefully start some good discussions amongst the community. The question we got today was around what were some of the challenges of building a cloud-based solution for manufacturers looking to move their infrastructure to the cloud. And for folks who may not know, at 4 Solutions, we currently have two products which are related. They follow a similar development cycle, built on a similar technology base, but they are Factory Stack and Pharma Stack. And it's a managed OT platform that's meant for hosting industrial workloads that you might have in your plants up in the cloud, in a private cloud. And so we have Factory Stack and Pharma Stack. Pharma Stack is geared towards the life sciences industry. Again, the fundamentals of those are otherwise kind of similar. And to answer that question, I'd say, there are all sorts of challenges in doing something like that. We're building something that is somewhat unique in this space. There's certainly other solutions that are cloud-based, a lot of SaaS applications. We're building more of a platform. It's an environment in which you can host specific SaaS applications that will solve your or your customers' end business needs. And we're providing this cloud-based environment with guardrails and best practices and documentation all kind of wrapped up in one. So I think figuring out how to properly define what it is that we're doing is something that's been challenging to communicate. Myself, being somebody who's really close to the technology, I like to talk in technical terms, but really a lot of the value that comes from what we're providing is a little bit higher level, and that's really where some of the messaging needs to be. So figuring out the messaging is a piece of it. And then beyond that, I'll say that, in building the platforms, a lot of the challenge has been less technical. There are technical challenges. I'll talk about some of those, but really cultural. And it probably shouldn't be a surprise to me. I've been working with doing SAP connectivity for a long time, and I spent a lot of time talking with SAP teams, SAP basis teams, IT folks who, anytime you want to do SAP connectivity, you have to kind of go through the checklist of how is this okay? Why is this okay? Why should we be doing things this way? And you see that from an angle of security, for example, connectivity, data loss, all things that I'll kind of talk about with the cloud, because a lot of the initial arguments or the thinking around that is from a point of, well, we didn't do this in the past. Why are we doing that now? So those are concerns that we see with SAP connectivity. We see them with the cloud as well. Security is a big one. How is this secure? Why is this secure? What are you doing to make this secure? Why can I trust you? And what's funny is that if you look at the OT space, traditionally security has been an afterthought for a very long time. And unfortunately, we've seen a lot of challenges that customers have had when they haven't taken it seriously. And it's not a malice thing. It's just, I've got my job as, let's say, an OT person is to keep my plant running. And I have other things that I'm focused on. Security sort of takes a step backwards in those cases. And that you can tend to get away with that until it's too late, until you have a big problem. You have a virus, you have a worm, you have a Trojan horse, you have something that all of a sudden creates downtime and a whole bunch of other problems, maybe trade secrets that get stolen. And there are tons of news articles about that in the industrial automation world where millions, billions of dollars have been lost to those kind of incidents. So it doesn't usually get taken seriously until it's too late. Really hard for teams who are focusing on, manufacturing, lean manufacturing, to have the investments to worry about that kind of stuff. And so that's part of our answer to this as well. We're actually taking ownership of the security piece, and we feel comfortable doing that because we can do it at scale. So we're able to properly staff these initiatives to work with cloud vendors around structuring best practices for these, working with the application vendors to do the same kind of thing. So we're very well positioned to do that. And we're structured as an organization, legally speaking, even to kind of deal with these kind of events if, the unfortunate happens and they do kind of come up. We're also looking at getting, security certifications to make customers more comfortable with the fact that we are doing this, things like SOC 2 compliance and all of that. So that's kind of the security angle. Data loss is another huge one. You say, well, I don't want to put my systems in the cloud because I could lose data, or even worse, if I lose connectivity, what if I have a SCADA system and I'm not able to control my devices? That's a major no-no. You can't not be able to shut off a pump or a motor or close a valve because you lose internet connectivity. So what's nice is that the key tools that we've adopted, the key applications that are a part of the Factory Stack and PharmaStack platforms, are built with this in mind. Ignition being a prime example, where it's got store and forward built into the platform. It's got local fallback control, where if you lose connectivity, you can fall back to maybe a more limited application that gives you some level of control. Data is historized and buffered and stored on disk, cached, so you don't have to worry about those kind of scenarios where you would if you were depending on a live connection up to the cloud. So that's a really big improvement. And then, some of the feedback or some of the concerns are from industry specific concerns like life sciences. And so the life sciences industry has traditionally been very conservative in a lot of ways, and for good reason. They're focused on patient safety above all things. And so they have very, in most cases, rigid means of handling things like validation and documentation. And what's actually interesting is that we're starting to see guidance coming from that industry, potentially even related to, you look at the digital transformation trend that's been happening across all industries, but life sciences has been, kind of very well aligned with that because of, you look at the vaccine development that was happening during COVID times and all of that, but they're very well positioned to make a difference in this space. There's investment dollars flowing into that industry, all that kind of stuff. But the industry is starting to put out guidance from organizations like ISPE about how you can start to adopt some of these technologies, how you can take more of a risk-based approach to testing. And so the stuff that we're doing is not such a far stretch or a big step change, because we're able to actually point to guidance from the industry that supports some of these technological and process decisions that we're making. Other challenges from a cultural standpoint are things like the perceived loss of control. So I no longer have this data that resides in my own plant. I'm trusting somebody else with my data. Maybe it's data that I care about for regulatory purposes, especially in life sciences, for example, or it's just data that contains sensitive information or trade secrets. And this is another case where, especially on the OT side, there wasn't always necessarily and isn't always necessarily a very strong backup strategy that companies are employing. My colleague James likes to talk about, taking the tape drive down to the bank as kind of your backup strategy. How often is that done? How often are these systems not only deployed for taking backups, but how often are those backups actually tested? Because a backup is no good if you can't actually do a restore process. So this is, again, another case of us being able to do some of these things at scale. And the other main one that we get is around, let's say, data sovereignty or data residency. So again, for regulatory or other reasons, I need my data to reside in a very particular location. It's got to be in my data center. It's got to be in a particular country, a particular region. And so one of the nice things about us leveraging some of the big cloud providers is that all of them have data centers that are in multiple regions. A lot of those regions have multiple zones, so multiple physical buildings in the same general geographic region, so that you can have robust failover capabilities. You don't have to worry so much about losing data. And again, we're talking about the comparison point being, I'm just going to do this in my own data center or in my own plant. And so we're able to rely on the robustness and scale of these cloud providers, and end customers can kind of benefit from all of that. So, and besides some of the, sort of discussion points that we have around this already, there is some prior art in this space where companies are becoming more accepting of these concepts in their own personal lives. And the example we like to give is, Microsoft 365, for example. People are very, very used to cloud-hosted software. In general, the digital transformation trends that you're seeing driven by the pandemic, by remote work, and the presence of other software products, especially business systems like SAP, that are already moving to the cloud. So starting to kind of go down the stack to be closer to the manufacturing systems is not as big of a stretch as it was 5, 10 years ago. We're already seeing some of those ancillary systems or systems that are meant to interface with those being moving into the cloud as well. So I'd say those are the main cultural changes, and it was probably the biggest surprise to me in building this these products that we had to kind of figure out a way to overcome. And then of course there are the technical challenges. So some of the products that we're using, the tools that we're using are stable in the sense that they've been around for a long time. They've been used in the IT space, the software world for a very long time, but they are continuing to evolve quickly. Companies are investing a lot of money in platforms like Kubernetes in some of the core cloud primitives and introducing new services, and keeping up with those technologies and making sure that we're not chasing the shiny, flashy thing, but selecting the best tools for the experience that we want to give end customers has been, that's a technical challenge. Also responding to requests from customers who, for example, have an existing relationship with a cloud provider and they're hard spec'd on using that cloud provider. So we've got to be able to support currently Azure, AWS, having discussions with a customer around Google Cloud, for example. So that's a challenge in supporting deploying these systems anywhere. And our approach to that has been to try to use the basic building blocks, or I think I said the cloud primitives earlier, that these providers make. So we're using the core compute resources, we're using virtual machines, we're using virtual networks, we're using managed database services and managed VPCs or virtual networks. And so we're not getting as deeply tied into some of the cloud specific things that are going to tie us really, really closely to a particular cloud vendor. This is really good because the news just came out, for example, that Google Cloud is shuttering down their IoT Core product. And so if we had built our product on top of something like that, which is a little bit more niche, now we'd be doing a bunch of engineering rework to try to accommodate some new technology solutions. So we're, for example, treating Kubernetes as kind of our operating system of sorts. That's kind of our common platform, and all the managed cloud providers, as well as some of the on-prem solutions, support that as a deployment platform. So by us kind of operating at that level of abstraction, it allows us to deploy in a lot more places than if we didn't have kind of that benefit and didn't make those decisions. So that's been a challenge, and also I think we've got a pretty good solution to dealing with that. And the other big challenge has really been just making general trade-offs between things like cost versus level of isolation. So we made the decision, especially driven by our pharmaceutical focus, to spin up completely isolated, separate infrastructure per customer. And that's expensive to do that. And it limits, in some cases, the economies of scale that you can get. Because, for example, you look at Kubernetes, where you want to have a whole bunch of different nodes, virtual machines that you're going to distribute workloads across. That works really, really well when you've got a bunch of nodes and a bunch of workloads. Because we're spinning up one of these per customer, there's more overhead with this, and you're not able to do what they call bin packing as much, where I'm going to cram a whole bunch of workloads because there aren't as many workloads per customer right now. So that's a cost isolation trade-off that we kind of have to make, and we're letting customers drive where we go with that, right? So looking at having other product offerings that might be a little bit more cost efficient in exchange for reduced levels of isolation for data that maybe won't be as kind of critical as life sciences or regulated data. So that's kind of some of the main technical challenges. And, what we want to continue to do is to learn from customers to drive the direction of where the products are going, to continue bringing the value that we get and the benefits that we get from being able to operate these things at scale, both in terms of the technology platform itself, as well as being able to centralize things like backups, like we talked about, security, monitoring as well. So being able to monitor uptime, that's something that it's harder for customers to do kind of within their own environment or their own site. So that's something we want to continue to do, is to learn from customers, let that drive the direction of the product. And, an example I can give for that as well is really around looking at hybrid cloud is something that came out of discussions we were having with customers. We kind of took a very ambitious cloud first approach for good reason. And in talking with customers, sometimes they're not able to go all in on cloud, or they want to adopt the cloud in a certain ways, like for backups, for monitoring, for some of those things that are not necessarily hosting their own critical workloads. And so that's something that came directly from customer feedback that we've been able to kind of integrate into the product. And now we have options for deploying anywhere, not just in our own private cloud. It could be in customer clouds, or it could be on other managed platforms that could live within different customer sites. So those are some of the challenges. We're going to continue to face more challenges, but I think we're really excited and empowered by the feedback that we've gotten from customers and just the general direction that we're seeing the industry trend in. We're getting a lot of great improvements being made to the core technology platforms like Ignition that are going to continue to make these kind of deployment models possible. And we're really excited at where the future is going. So thank you for joining me for these few minutes today. I'm looking forward to having more of these sessions to kind of go through some community questions and provide some feedback, and looking forward to just getting that discussion going and continuing to stay in touch with all of you. So thanks very much, and we'll be in touch.